Addressed the nation in 1951 on the U.S. purpose in the Korean War. Quote, "What we are doing in Korea is this. We are trying to prevent a third world war. Defeat of aggression in Korea may be a turning point in the world's search for a practical way of achieving peace and security." And that mission goes on. Tucker's up.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Well, it turns out the DOJ failed to dictate the final result of the 2016 presidential election, despite the fervent efforts of some of the bureaucrats who work there. But a year and a half into the Trump administration, the Justice Department still seems at times to be operating as a kind of shadow government, a place that considers itself beyond the reach of normal oversight. Back in the real world, Congress has the explicit constitutional power to oversee the FBI and all other executive agencies. That's the way it's supposed to work. Apparently, that fact infuriates the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Earlier this year, in January, Rosenstein threatened to subpoena the emails and the phone records of staffers on the House Intelligence Committee because the committee was being too aggressive in its probe of the Russia investigation. The message from Rosenstein: back off. You want to investigate us? We will investigate you. Fox Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge broke that story, and she has more on it tonight. Catherine?
Well, thanks, Tucker. The emails written on government accounts formally documented the January meeting for the House Office of General Counsel, the Hill's top lawyer who is charged with protecting Congress and its oversight responsibilities. The closed-door meeting included Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, FBI Director Christopher Wray, their senior advisors, as well as House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes and his senior staff, and it came at the height of alleged government surveillance abuses aimed at the Trump campaign. Today, senior lawmakers responded to allegations. The Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein threatened to subpoena records and turn the tables on the Republican-led House Intelligence Committee and staff over the Russia case.
It is deeply concerning that instead of having a cooperative relationship with this agency, respectful of the importance of the Congress having access to documents regarding matters that they're investigating, that they have oversight responsibility for, and this is not the way to conduct that.
Both the FBI and Justice Department strongly dispute the characterization. A Justice Department official told Fox News Rosenstein never threatened anyone with a criminal investigation. A House Intelligence Committee Democrat took aim at Chairman Nunes, whose staffers documented the incident.
I know the reputation of Rod Rosenstein, and that is one of impeccable character. And I know the reputation of Devin Nunes, and that is one of misleading, obstructing, attempting to intervene in an investigation.
Late today, Chairman Nunes and Republican members of the House Intelligence Committee signed this letter to Rod Rosenstein, rejecting another briefing by the FBI and Justice Department tomorrow, saying anything short of providing the records that are under subpoena, in their opinion, is an obstruction of justice. Tucker.
Catherine, thank you for that and for breaking that story in the first place. Rod Rosenstein's recent behavior is not the only example of the DOJ apparently viewing itself as beyond normal oversight. Months ago, we discovered that FBI agents Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were political ideologues whose personal views intruded on their law enforcement duties. How far did their misconduct go, and who else might be involved? The public has a right to know that, but we don't, because the DOJ keeps trying to censor the text messages between Strzok and Page before releasing them. Here's one example. In a September 2015 text, Strzok complained about the DOJ's handling of a case, but his exact complaint was redacted. Why? We don't know. But thanks to work by Senator Ron Johnson's office, we know that Strzok was complaining that the DOJ wanted to, quote, bargain away everything, and that it had, quote, Stockholm syndrome. Could Strzok have been referring to how the DOJ handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation and how it did everything it could to avoid bringing charges against any of Clinton's team? It looks that way from the context, but it's still not clear. What is clear is that nothing Strzok said was a security threat that would require a redaction in order to protect this country. The DOJ was just trying to cover itself to keep the public from learning the truths about what was going on. Is that a defense? Jonathan Shirley is a professor at George Washington University Law School, and he joins us tonight. Professor, it's a very simple question. Is the Department of Justice allowed to redact information solely for the purpose of protecting its own reputation?
It is not, even though it has a long history of doing so, not just in Congress, but in the courts. What's really funny is that they will charge someone who gives them misleading information, but they'll tell Congress that they've redacted classified information that proves entirely unclassified. And there is this sense of acting with utter impunity when you redact these types of documents. If you look at the language that was uncovered by Senator Johnson and his staff, that material could not be considered classified under any definition. So the question is why the committee has long accepted this type of conduct, including Democrats. They can disagree with Chairman Nunes, they can disagree with the White House, but they should all agree on the fact that this is an improper use of redaction.
And it's been going on, you said, for quite some time. So this is basically the status quo. This is not a new way of doing business.
Unfortunately, it is. I've been counsel in national security cases against the government where they have redacted material, where I've objected to the courts that it's clearly not classified. I've been allowed into SCIFs or classified settings where I've reviewed the material. And this is a recurring complaint among counsel in national security cases.
So in this specific case, you have the Deputy Attorney General, and no one disputes these facts. The characterization is different on either side, but nobody disputes that Rod Rosenstein went over to the Congress and threatened to subpoena the personal communications of members there. Have you ever seen anything like that? And what does it suggest about the relationship between the DOJ and the Oversight Committee?
Well, first of all, it really does reflect the long mistreatment of Congress. You know, these committees have not had a robust oversight record. They often roll over. This is something new, and frankly, those of us who've wanted more oversight have welcomed the last year, because finally you have a committee saying, wait, we're not just going to accept any redactions you have. We're not going to take no for an answer on something we clearly have oversight duties. Now, threatening, whether it's criminal or civil, staffers or members is clearly inappropriate. You know, I can understand that Rosenstein may felt that he was being mistreated, but it doesn't matter. You have to get over it. Congress created the Department of Justice. This isn't personal. It is oversight business. So no matter how aggrieved you may be, you cannot speak to an oversight committee and threaten those staffers with taking something like subpoenas to their doorstep.
The Congress does have oversight over the executive agencies, including the Department of Justice, correct? Or is that, I mean, you watch the other channels and you'd think that that was something that right-wingers made up last week, but that's a constitutional principle. Am I right?
No, that's absolutely right. And you really shouldn't pick fights with people with oversight power.
Yeah, I guess you shouldn't. Professor, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Dana Goldman is a former federal prosecutor, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Goldman, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here.
So you just heard Jonathan Turley make, I thought, a good point, and one I've heard others make before, that this has been going on for a long time, not just in this administration, but in previous administrations, where the Department of Justice withholds information inappropriately from Congress, claiming that that information is classified, and when unredacted, it turns out to have been not classified. In other words, they were lying. Why would anyone ever defend that practice?
Well, these things can often be subject to interpretation, and the prosecutor may have some belief at an initial stage that there are, or the Department of Justice may have a belief at an initial stage that things may be classified either in relation to that case or in other cases, or there may be some theory that it is classified. The defense attorney disagrees that it's and says it's not classified, and ultimately a judge decides it. This is no different than
okay, so let me give you an example. Yeah, this is a little bit different. So, for example, the Department of Justice, the Trump Department of Justice, I'll say, withheld this information from the Congress, that Andrew McCabe spent $70,000 on a conference table. Now, you could argue that he had a right to do that, or it was appropriate, or whatever, but you can't argue that that information is itself classified or critical to American national security. That's butt covering. Why would anyone defend that?
Well, you're trying to hone in on one particular reason why things are redacted or why things should not be.
What would be the justification for redacting Andrew McCabe spending $70,000 on a conference table?
I don't know, you know, and I don't know the detailed circumstances. I think the point that I would want to make to you and listening to what Jonathan Turley just said as well. First of all, as we're looking at these as redactions and we're looking at the oversight role into the Department of Justice, I think you have to draw a very clear line between investigations that are over, such as the Clinton email investigations, and investigations that are ongoing, such as the Trump-Russia investigation. And there is a long-standing practice that the Department of Justice does not give over information relevant to ongoing investigations to Congress. And that's something that the House Intelligence Committee, through the use of their purported oversight role, has sort of done away with and is trying to get it.
When you say purported oversight role, do they not have an oversight role?
They have an oversight role, but
what do you mean purported oversight role?
Well, they're using the guise of their oversight role to ask for information that they should not get, or that they are potentially and by many accounts coordinating with the White House and others who are the subject of the investigation. That's entirely improper.
Look, I understand that you're a partisan involved in a partisan debate, but take 3 steps back. There's a public interest here. So we know that the last administration had a paid informant spying on at least 3 members of the Trump campaign. Now, maybe there was a good reason for that, maybe there wasn't. But the fact of it is true, and it's known by the public. And the fact of it shakes the public's faith in the integrity of the Department of Justice. So why wouldn't responsible people do their very best to explain why the hell that happened as soon as they possibly can and calm public fears that the system is corrupt? Because the public is beginning to believe it is, including me. Why wouldn't we have the right to know why that happened?
I actually think I'm not at all partisan. I think the people who use the term spy in the context of a confidential informant are doing so only for partisan reasons, because a spy does not exist within the FBI. So when you're going down that road of using a spy, and the simple
what
answer...
I'm doing is speaking plain English, and what you're doing is carrying water for a political party. I am saying that they spied on members of the Trump campaign. They gathered information without the knowledge of the people they were speaking to.
Which happens in thousands of investigations. It happens in thousands of investigations across the country.
It may, but it doesn't answer the question, which I think I have a right to know, which is, why did that happen?
You don't have a right to know.
This is not normal. This is not.
You don't have a right to know.
That's your
investigations,
view of it.
No, well, investigations are
to know
confidential. FBI investigations are confidential for very important reasons, including the protection of people who aren't charged, including for the protection of sources and information, such as confidential informants. You don't have a right to know.
I understand. Actually, I would disagree with you completely. And I know that you are a former prosecutor, so you're coming at this from a different point of view, obviously. But we know that this happened. No one is disputing it happens. We know the names of the people involved. And so all of that information is public. It's been in the New York Times. You don't acknowledge that there's a public interest in explaining this to the public so they can trust their government again. Why was the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign? You don't like the word spying.
I don't dispute that there is a public interest. I don't dispute there's a public interest. There absolutely is a public interest. It is outweighed in the current moment by an ongoing and confidential investigation. The public does have a right to know at some point after the ongoing investigation is not jeopardized
so then why are
by the
people
revelation
like me who are asking honest, in my case, sincerely nonpartisan questions? Like, how the hell did this happen? Why am I being attacked as someone who is challenging the rule of law or seeking to undermine the system? My position is I'm trying to preserve public faith in the system with sunlight. I mean, I thought that was a traditionally liberal position, is it not?
I agree with you, but all I'm saying is that there absolutely is a public interest. I do think that you and others have a right to know what happened during the course of an investigation, just not while the investigation is going on. And that's the critical difference. By preserving the rule of law, you have to preserve the confidentiality of the investigation so witnesses can't tailor their testimony, so sources are protected. Okay. Ultimately, it will all come out, and you do have a right to know, and that's why I draw the distinction between the Clinton email investigation, which is over, and an ongoing investigation where this confidential informant is very relevant.
Daniel, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
House Republicans making another push on immigration. Will their bills fulfill the president's promises during the campaign, or are they yet another sop to the donor class? We'll get to the bottom of that question next. House House Republicans once again trying to hammer out a deal on immigration ahead of the fall elections. They feel that's very important for some reason. A current draft proposal being considered by Republican leaders is probably better than prior proposals, but it falls far short of what the current president campaigned on. It would give amnesty to some DACA recipients. In return, it would fund a border wall, it says, end the diversity lottery, and catch and release, and create a more merit-based legal immigration system. But it would not end chain migration, cut overall immigration levels, or, critically, implement E-Verify to keep employers from employing illegal aliens. What to make of this plan, exactly? Lou Dobbs is, of course, the host of Lou Dobbs Tonight on Fox Business, and maybe more than any other person in public life has followed this subject carefully over more than a decade. Lou, thank you for coming on. What do you make of this? It's complex, but I know that you can cut to the heart of it.
Well, let's cut through the complexity, because first of all, we don't know what's in it. There has been no debate. Right. There has been no writing of text or amendments. It is a preposterous closed room deal entirely drawn up by the Speaker, who is owned lock, stock, and barrel by K Street, the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, the Koch brothers, and Wall Street. So we know one thing: it's not going to be in favor of the American middle class and American working families. And indeed, that is Ryan's, that's his hallmark for 20 years in the House. He works for K Street.
So why the push to get this through without a debate? I mean, it seems like Republicans could win this debate. If you look at all the polling on it, there's a lot of polling. The public is basically on the side of the administration on this question. Why not run on it?
As you have reported, you can slice and dice the demographics any way you want to, and more people are disgusted and appalled by the deleterious and negative impact of illegal immigration into this country, and that's just simply the straightforward facts. But they can't even raise a voice that is even remotely comparable to the ownership of the establishment and global elites who are demanding cheap labor. And that's straightforward. It is their purpose to bring more immigration into this country and to preserve lower wages. Just as President Trump has wages rising, the middle class is now growing. It was stagnant and declining for 20 years until President Trump moved into the Oval Office.
So you're saying that the current Republican leadership is willing to ignore the most basic lesson of the last election and the expressed will of the American population in order to serve the interests of a very small group of people who pay the bills? Absolutely.
And Ryan is a lame duck speaker, remember. He will only be in office until January of next year. But that's right, he resigned, but is only the Republican conference can do in the House of Representatives. He is now enfranchised with the leadership of the conference and what will almost assuredly be a loss of 50 seats in the midterm elections as a result of moving into the amnesty abyss. The base will not stand for this for 1 minute, no matter how popular the president is, and he's wildly popular, and no matter the fictions that are spun up by Ryan and his so-called leadership council.
Where they get do they have pollsters who are telling them that politically this is smart?
No, they have well-paid strategists telling them they should run on the tax cuts rather than the Trump agenda, which is tax cuts, deregulation, balancing international trade, creating jobs, bringing back manufacturing, dealing with all of the important issues in foreign policy, whether it is the immense success of the Singapore summit, which is just one of a litany of achievements of this president, unprecedented achievements over the course of 16 months. It is the most mindless, lemming-like rush I've ever seen, even though they're rhinos, to absolute disaster.
Rhinos rushing like lemmings, mindlessly. I love it. Lou Dobbs, great to see you, as always. Thank you.
The mindlessly, I admit, was redundant. Thanks. Great to be with you, Tucker.
So good. Great to see you, Lou.
Thank you.
Well, Berkeley has a plan for fixing the climate emergency they have identified. Population control. You knew it was coming to that at some point. That story next. "50 years ago, Berkeley, California was famous for its free speech activism. Today, it is a very different place. This week, Berkeley's city council unanimously declared to be the world in, quote, a climate emergency. To fix that emergency, Berkeley called for a push to halt all carbon emissions worldwide and said governments must make efforts to, quote, humanely stabilize population, a phrase Robespierre would surely love. Anna Shea Hossein is a writer and political commentator, and she joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Tucker.
I'm a pretty literal person. They say it's a climate emergency. Sounds right to me. So if it's an actual emergency, why does anyone in Berkeley have an air conditioner or a car? I mean, if they really believe that, no, it's sincere. I mean, I hate to sort of ask that people live out their purported beliefs, but if they're telling the rest of us we need to have fewer kids, why are they still driving and using AC, honestly?
You know, I totally agree with you, Tucker, but I also don't think they're just telling us to have less babies. I mean, climate change and the impact that human beings have on environment is related to a lot of stuff, not just the amount of children that we're having. It's about carbon emissions. It's about eating less meat. So I think we can all agree that we care about our planet, but it's not just about having less children.
Oh, no, and I don't think it is. And by the way, let me just say for the record, the whole idea is totally no, I think the idea is insane and grotesque, and it's a window into what this really is, which is social control.
But is that what Berkeley is saying?
They would even mention how.
Is that what they're saying?
What they're saying
not
is it's an emergency.
It's an emergency. Everybody stop having babies. But it is. Is it not an emergency?
Okay, but hold on. If they are saying it's an emergency, presumably they believe it is. So how can they justify riding buses, having cars, refrigerators, any activity that adds to the sum total of CO2 emissions?
Exactly.
Why are they still committing these activities? No, I'm serious. Why should I listen and take anyone seriously who is driving a car and simultaneously telling me not to have more kids?
Well, I don't think they're saying that. It's a combination of factors. And the climate is really complex, Tucker, right? It's not just one thing. You need to stop having babies. I need to stop riding my car. I think in general, the younger generation, the millennials, are becoming more environmentally cautious. We have more ride-sharing apps. I mean, I think the technology is catching up to the fact that people are becoming more conscious.
Young people are much poorer because they are deeply in student loan debt for degrees that mean nothing because they've bought into a system that is essentially fraudulent. And they have no money. Actually, that's up there. Environmentally consciousness.
They are. The millennials are. Okay, that's also one part of it. There's more than one factor, Tucker, when it comes to climate change and what we can do to reduce our impact on it.
Look, I actually am in favor of a clean environment. So I wonder why, have you noticed this, that places that spend the most energy telling the rest of us that the world is ending because of climate change also tend to have the dirtiest streets and the largest number of people relieving themselves on the sidewalk and the most trash? Why not, if you really care about the environment, maybe you could clean up the sidewalk in front of City Hall. Does that ever occur to liberals, I wonder?
You know what? Not just liberals. It's not liberals that are responsible for climate change. It's all of us. And I agree with you. We can't just talk the talk. We have to, also follow up with actions. And,
but wait, why? No, but seriously, if you care about the environment and making the world cleaner, and by the way, sincerely, I am for that. Can we all
agree that we agree with that? We all want to keep the environment cleaner and save our planet.
Yeah, but have you been to Berkeley recently? Have you been to New York City? Have you been to San Francisco? There are people with their trousers down, relieving themselves on the sidewalk, and then
Tucker,
walking around them are environmentalists on their way to lecture me about how many kids I have.
Yeah, but you know what? It's not necessarily about where in the world is more populated. It's about who is using more resources. And I completely agree with you. We all have to do much better.
I think we're sort of talking past each other. Can you agree that if we're going to make the world cleaner, we can start by cleaning up the sidewalks, and then maybe we can get to the part about fixing the hole in the ozone layer?
Yes and no. I don't think it has to be either or. It's every day.
Why is it? Why are the cities with the most open and aggressive commitment to the environment the dirtiest. Why is Portland, Oregon a filthy place downtown?
That's not necessarily
when everybody in Portland is an environment. Have you been to Portland, Oregon recently?
I'm not talking specifically about Portland, but not all in cities that are saying that we need to do better about our environment are filthy. Where are you getting that stat from?
Okay. But just track with me really quick just for this one question. If you say you care about the environment, do you agree or disagree that maybe you should start by cleaning up the street in front of your house?
It's not why can't you do both? Do both.
I'm not saying you can't do both, but why is it that the people lecturing me about the environment live in environments that are filthy?
We all care about the planet. We can all do more.
Right. No, we don't all care about the planet. I care about the planet. That's why my house has nobody sleeping on the front step, because I care about the environment.
Okay, what kind of car do you drive? Okay.
I don't have a car. That's how committed I am.
Oh, really?
Anushay, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, the creepy porn lawyer isn't doing as well as he once did. Fear not, though, he knows exactly who to blame for his troubles. A creepy porn lawyer update next.
I think there is a legitimate question about whether Avenatti's been overexposed.
He is overexposed, Joe, and he is underdelivered.
You don't go on cable news 10, 12 times a day. That's Bush League. All of those things are what Bush League lawyers do when they're in it to get the publicity.
This attorney, Michael Avenatti, is like feeling very Gloria Allred on me. Overexposed.
Oh, the fickle media. They use him, then discard him. The creepy porn lawyer appears to have overstayed his welcome. You saw that coming. The first 100 or 200 TV hits were fine, but even now MSNBC is getting tired of him. So what's the creepy porn lawyer's next move? Well, it's obvious if you've been paying attention. Blame Russia. Duh. In an interview with the Daily Beast, creepy porn lawyer says that Russia, Putin, is running a smear campaign against him in the press. You shouldn't be shocked by that explanation. It should sound pretty familiar. The left has blamed Russia for pretty much everything you can think of. Trump winning the 2016 election, the release of DNC emails, Brexit, the NRA, left-wing populism in Mexico. That was Russia's fault. But so was right-wing populism in the Netherlands. Left and right-wing populism in Italy, simultaneously. The campaign to release the Devin Nunes memo, Marine Le Pen's rise, Jill Stein here in the United States, the Catalonian independence movement in Spain, social media attacks on Paul Ryan, hacking of the electrical grid, a 2017 documentary not winning an Oscar, WikiLeaks, the Facebook support for Bernie Sanders, the desire to investigate FISA abuses, opposition to the deep state, an airplane crash that killed 69 Russians in February, not wanting to give guns to the Ukraine, even, and this is the best of all, President Trump's decision to bomb Syria, in which thousands of Russian troops are currently stationed, that was a Russian operation too. Apparently the Russians managed to do all of this, working at cross purposes against themselves, and still, and this is the amazing thing, and a credit, by the way, to Slavic vigor, still have enough energy to go after a creepy porn lawyer here in American cable news world. They're amazing, those Russians. On the show, we've chronicled the war on standards at the FAA, where irrelevant biographical questions were imposed on aspiring air traffic controllers. Sadly, this is far from the only example of standards declining in the United States. Beneath public view, there's never debate on any of this. It just happens. It's happening, in fact, in scientific fields. You wouldn't think it would, but it is. And in the pages of a City Journal, Heather McDonald has chronicled it in detail, how schools and other institutions are cutting requirements in an effort to be more diverse, whatever that means. Heather McDonald also wrote the upcoming book, The Diversity Delusion, and she joins us tonight. Heather, thank you for coming on. So we were really stunned to find that the FAA was intentionally trying to hire unqualified air traffic controllers because it's insane and dangerous. But you wouldn't think that that same impulse would find its way into the hard sciences, into medicine, for example, or research science. But you say that it is.
It's very disturbing, Tucker. There's not a single meritocratic institution that is free from the poison of identity politics. The federal government is wasting tens of millions of taxpayer dollars pressuring scientific labs to hire by the irrelevant criteria of race and gender. It's doing research on, get this, intersectionality in the STEM fields, research conducted by 2 specialists in gender identity. This is not what Congress had in mind when they created the National Science Foundation in 1950 to sponsor serious scientific research. We're putting our scientific competitiveness at great risk by introducing the total irrelevancy of race and gender diversity into scientific accomplishment.
Well, I'm confused because I thought the left, quote, believed in science. They had a whole march announcing that, I think, about a year and a half ago. Is there scientific evidence that the race or gender of a scientific researcher, for example, is material, that it affects the outcome of the experiment in some way?
Well, the left hates science when it's proving facts that they don't like, and it hates objectivity. But no, there is absolutely no scientific evidence. We have had 200 grantees of the National Science Foundation that have won Nobel Prizes, things like discovering dark matter, discovering how viruses work. And this was with utter indifference, true color blindness, true meritocracy. And there's, of course, a conceit on the left that diversity matters in scientific thinking. No, it doesn't. If a lab is all female, great. If a lab is all Asian, great. If a lab is all black, great. All the public cares about is, are you working to cure Alzheimer's? And the way you do that is by being color and gender blind and hiring on merit, not on race and gender.
It's terrifying. They've infected science with politics, obviously. I hope you will come back in future days with details on all this, Heather. Heather McDonald, great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, the DOJ Inspector General is set to finally release his report on the Clinton email investigations. What will we learn from that? Glenn Greenwald joins us next. Well, it's turning out to be a pretty tough time to be a bureaucrat at the Department of Justice. For decades, most of us didn't really know what they did over at DOJ. Uphold the law, that's all we knew. But now, sunlight is pouring into that agency, and we're learning a lot. Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein, for example, has been caught threatening congressional staffers with subpoenas for trying to do their job, overseeing his agency. Meanwhile, tomorrow, DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz will release his report on the Hillary Clinton email investigation. It could shine a harsh light on a number of key players in that probe. What exactly can we expect from it? Joining us now is Glenn Greenwald. He's an editor at The Intercept, and he joins us from Rio. Glenn, thanks a lot for coming on. So what are we likely to see in tomorrow's IG report?
The focus is the behavior of the FBI and also the Justice Department as part of the 2016 elections, particularly the investigation of possible criminality relating to Hillary Clinton's private email server. There are, I think, a consensus of reports that suggest that the report will lambast Jim Comey, the then FBI director, Andrew McCabe, his deputy, as well as criticize then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. But it could cut both ways because a lot of the criticism of Comey came from Democrats, that particularly he should never have stood up at that press conference in mid-2016 and when he announced that there wouldn't be charges brought against Hillary Clinton, and then proceed to criticize her for what she did. That's not the role of the FBI director. It's also possible that they'll conclude that there was political bias in the whole process that led to the decision not to charge Hillary Clinton in the first place. So it's unclear who politically it will help, but it's certainly going to reflect, by all accounts, very poorly on top Justice Department and FBI officials.
Well, he shouldn't have criticized Hillary Clinton. I said so at the time. I mean, I'm not a Hillary Clinton voter, but that is absolutely not his role. If she committed a crime, indict her. If she didn't, back off. I'm very struck by the reaction to this story in the press. The default seems to be, you don't have a right, A, to know what your government is doing, and B, to press too hard to find out there's something wrong with you. You're unpatriotic. Why wouldn't the press be more interested in knowing what actually happens at DOJ?
This has been, of course, I think the principal defect with the media for many years, which is that they so closely identify with the very government agencies that they claim to be serving as watchdog over, that they more often than not end up defending their prerogatives and their secrecy powers and what it is that they do, rather than trying to do their job, which is to shine a light on what it is that they're doing. Obviously, like every agency, the Justice Department does occasionally have legitimate secrecy issues when they're conducting a criminal investigation or being involved with a grand jury. It's legitimate that the public should know, really, to protect the people they're investigating, right? Because you don't want their name being smeared until there's evidence that they've actually done anything wrong. But when you're talking about something as politically momentous as Jim Comey's investigation of the two major presidential candidates, once the election is over, and at least in Hillary Clinton's case, the investigation has been brought to an end, we ought to know everything about what they did internally and what they said. And yet I think you're right. Not only is there very little interest on the part of the media, there's almost this anger at those people who want to actually bring transparency to what the people with the most powerful authorities in the world to read through your emails, to look at your phone bills, to make you say things actually did. And I think that's very problematic.
Yeah, it's deeply revealing of them. And quickly, you've covered this stuff for a long time. When the truth finally comes to light, how often have you noticed that information you weren't allowed to see because it was classified and held back in the interest of the safety of the United States of America turned out to be, not classified at all? This was just butt covering by whatever agency was withholding it.
In the overwhelming majority of cases, when the government claims that things must be kept secret because of national security, one of two things is true. Either the information is incredibly banal and isn't even arguably the kind of information that ought to be kept from the American people, or the reason they want to keep it secret is not to protect national security, but to shield their own reputations and potentially their own legal interests because they were engaged in secret wrongdoing. And in a healthy democracy, the presumption should be the people should know what their government is doing and the government should know what the people are doing. And we've reversed that. So we know almost nothing about what they do and they know everything about what we do. And that's really, really disturbing.
Totally true. That's almost worth getting a tattoo of that. It's so true. Glenn Greenwald, thank you. Glenn Greenwald is not only one of the most honest commenters on American politics, he's also deeply committed to dogs and runs a dog shelter out of his house. And so we're going to talk to him about that in great detail in the next Inside the Issues special later this summer. Stay tuned for that. Up next, Robert De Niro's run of anti-Trump comments has fired up Hollywood, but could their enthusiasm help, paradoxically, the president win re-election? That's next.